at the backdrop where Kenyans are saying we needed to feel the money in our pockets immediately you got in, because what happened immediately after that, we saw taxes go up, and that was contrary to what it is the president had promised. That, together with the fact that today you just speak to a Kenyan, who are you voting for? They will say, I do not know who I'm voting for, but I know exactly who I'm not voting for.
Yes.
You know, and that could go either way, either opposition or be the president, whichever way you want to look at it. It is not clear on who exactly Kenyans are talking about. Now, with that statement right there, is the political class looking at that and positioning themselves as being the person that Kenyans will start saying, I know exactly who I'm voting for, even as I know exactly who I'm not voting for?
Well, you know, Kenyans have got an insatiable appetite for instant coffee and instant tea. But understand, turning around the economy requires for you to brew the coffee. Mm-hmm. You recall when President Ruto and his deputy were being sworn in at Kasarani, while President Ruto was diplomatic, his deputy was not. He said they've gone to the granary and there's nothing. There even no rats because there's no maize to be eaten. So he really painted a very bad picture. And I recall Musalia Mudavadi saying that things are going to get worse before they can get better. That they needed to do a lot of policy corrections and policy reviews. You recall the subsidies that they did. And at that stage, people said, wait a minute, we'll give you a number of years. Yes. And it's Musalia Mudavadi who said that it may take up to 3 years for them to turn around. Like, for instance, if you remember the issue of maize, there was a subsidies offered for consumption, but they said we are going to review it. It's going to be for production. So understand now people can easily afford ugali. And understand from a food security perspective, it must be affordable and it must be available. Yeah, but when you look at Kenyans from 1963, when we go to the ballots, it's almost a vote of anger. People go there fuming, managing blood pressure, managing all manner of lifestyle conditions, and they're doing press-ups. So it's a vote of anger. So people are generally annoyed every time they cast the ballots. And if our democracy was to grow, we should be voting for. And as Dr. Wheeler has indicated here, the United Opposition has indicated times above number that it's going to be one term. But a prudent practitioner or a scholar of politics will ask, so what? What happens after, if President Ruto does one term, what happens? And in my view, the challenge we have in Kenya is around systems and infrastructure we have put around leadership, and that is what must be corrected. And in my view, if anybody expects to be a president, rather win the elections next year, by simply using the ethnic card, then they'll be in a state of shock. And that is what part of the opposition has been doing. You recall a gentleman called Mr. Rigathi Gachagua. Last time when he went to the US, he met members from one particular ethnic group. And when he was in the UK a few days ago, it was the same thing and the same message. So it seems to me that what he places on the table is an ethnic card. And people from his background who do not support him are quickly branded as traitors. So one begins to wonder, when you've got a divergent view, are you branded as a traitor? And understand the Kenyan constitution says that freedom of association, movement, and as you deem fit. But for President Ruto to retain his position, he must engage in strategic communications. And I think that is where somebody like Professor Wheeler comes in. Because right now, if you go to any market, understand even the US, which has got oil, people are complaining about the cost of oil at the pump. If you go to many countries, even including Angola, people are really complaining. But then Kenyans must understand that these are geopolitical variables outside the control of President Ruto. That would be number one. And then number two, the cost of fuel, which goes everywhere. Matatus are normally very happy to increase the fares, but are reluctant to reduce it. People say that now you need to reduce the tax component. So if you're going to have that conversation, and you recall Mr. Mbadi came up with some provisions around VAT to reduce that cost, but people must say, then are we going to make a sacrifice? Because I see wherever the president goes, people wanasema tunaomba barabara, tunataka hospitali, but they don't make the connection that if you want those barabaras and hospitalities, then it's your tax. So in my view, there is need of having a national conversation and ask ourselves, what do we really want as a nation?
But taxation,
and where do you want to go?
The proceeds of taxation are not towards development. It doesn't happen anywhere. Taxation proceeds are not for development. Taxation proceeds are supposed to actually make sure that the lights are on, the water's running.
Yes.
If you're looking for development, that is now when you go for loans. Am I wrong, Dr. Miller? Am I wrong?
You're right.
And as a student of, as an accountant, when you are engaging in, when you are coming up with tax, if you use the best practices, like in the Nordic countries, you never hear anybody complaining about tax.
That is because you can see the direct result of taxation.
Not even see.
You can feel
you can actually
it.
touch.
Your children, you don't pay school fees until your children turn 18. And even then, there are state programs whereby at the varsity, university, tertiary level, that you can almost go and pay nothing for your children to even go to university. That you will actually